thinking, what is the biggest threat to your safety? I was thinking maybe what's the most common, and I was thinking maybe verbal abuse or something like that. But then the biggest threat, I guess, being attacked.
Okay, being attacked. What do you reckon, Graham? You've been around a wee while, bit of tenure there.
Yeah, no, I think ultimately that. I remember years ago the RSPCA officer got shot and killed years ago, and I guess part of it is just never quite sure the headspace of the different people you're interacting with, and being a government official, turn up in a red plate car. Most of our cars are often unmarked, so you're never quite sure what's gone through the background and what's gone through someone's head. And there's no shortage of people to be pretty upset with different people within the public service. I share a building with Department of Health, and they're always retrieving kids from unsafe households and stuff, and there'll be pretty angry people at the front of the building. So sometimes they just don't know. If you're from the government, if there's a red plate vehicle, there's all sorts of other triggers out there that if you're lucky, you never get to experience someone who's taken out you on the wrong day for taking out that aggression. But I guess that's, you're never quite sure what you're walking into, I guess.
Yeah, so the unknown is a big threat to your safety as well.
Yeah. Well, not prepared. I mean, most of the things we're going to public events and stuff, and you're just hoping that, but there's no shortage of people grumpy for some reason about something someone or some government did somewhere. Sure. So yeah, that's part of it. Just never sure what you're walking into and someone's background.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think's the biggest threat to your safety, Louisa?
I was going to say, to be all honest, it's yourself. Because if you can control what you're doing, you can potentially just de-escalate anything that you get yourself into, or at least not enter a situation that is unknown or dangerous.
Good. Self-awareness. It's a huge threat to our own safety. If we don't understand where we sit on the spectrum, then we won't understand how we're going to react when something big like that happens. Yeah, perfect. In the same way, we need to be aware of those other things that Kit and Graham brought up as well, is that we need to understand that there are a number of threats out there, but more importantly, it's about understanding ourselves, which is fantastic. So if we were to put ourselves in one of those situations where there's a lot of high stress, so for example, we're talking about the lady that was inside the house, one of our staff, our government staff. At the start of that conversation, she's sitting at the table with the farmer inside of his house. He's nearest the exit. And then when she mentioned something, he started to rack up and become aggressive, stands up, right? Let's just change that context a little bit. Let's say he stood up and he grabbed something from the kitchen bench. Let's say he grabbed some type of weapon, and then he blocked the exit, right? I would consider that pretty high stress, and I'm sure everyone else would as well. So in that circumstance, do you think that you would revert to something that's an officer trained mindset under extreme stress, or do you think you're going to go back to something that's more naturally inbuilt? Thoughts?
I think naturally inbuilt.
Okay.
I guess, doing training like this, but it's about then practicing what you learn would be important. Because, it's pretty easy, I think, for many things, not just that scenario, but to go back to natural reactions.
Yeah, sure.
Flight and freeze or fight. Yeah.
Okay, cool. We'll talk a bit about that later on. So what do you think, Graham? What do you reckon? Officer safety?
I think so. Unfamiliar, because it's not something you frequent very often, it would be your first reaction would be completely natural, flight or flee, freeze, whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
But I think part of it too, I'm normally a pretty good talker. So be trying to calm the situation down, I guess, and listen to the person, trying to understand what's made them so angry and find out, just let them vent a bit. So that would be, keeping an eye on, Jesus, how do I get here? What's the exits? Yeah.
Okay.
Probably.
Louisa, what do you think you're going to do?
I think initially you'd revert back to fight or flight, and it's then having the skill or the training to then go, well, actually, I'm having an adrenaline rush. I'm going through all these processes. need to think clearly. I think someone in the CFA described it really well. When you're driving code 1 with sirens, you get sirenitis. And the thing about experience and everything is being able to go, yes, this is what I'm experiencing. This is how I need to react.
Good. I like that analogy as well. And you're right. The first time you turn the lights and sirens on any vehicle and everyone's pulling over and you're driving above the speed limit to try and get to somewhere to help someone, the adrenaline goes through the roof. It's understanding that over a period of time with the experiences that we have, that we learn to cope a little bit better under those stresses. It doesn't mean that we're going to be like that every single time, because if you've got a big delay between one event and another, sometimes we end up in a position where we're trying to fight back to those past experiences to pull them back to give us a hand at that time. But I want to talk about mindset specifically. What we do know about mindset is it's essentially those things that are set in our minds, hence the word mindset. Our patterns, right? If you've got things that are cycling around in your life, oftentimes that's a pattern. If you can't communicate very well, oftentimes that's a pattern created a lot way back in the past, and something that we need to be aware of. Our behaviors, our patterns, our values that are taught to us, our beliefs, our cultures, our morals, all those types of things start to make the person we are today. Super important to know, because we've got a lot of people that have come from some pretty rubbish backgrounds. And I do a lot of work with youth, and even in the likes of Dandenong, working with some at-risk youth and helping out in a voluntary capacity, talking to these kids about why they are the way they are. And oftentimes they don't understand the word mindset. They think, oh yeah, well, it just means that I've just got to go there and have a positive mindset. It's not even about that. It's about them understanding what's set in their mind so that we can help to change it. That's the super important part. And when it comes to the creation of mindset, we know, and psychology tells us, that our automatic response system is actually birthed between the 0 and 7 years of age. As I say, I'm doing this psychology degree, and one of the biggest things I learnt almost immediately was that not all psychologists agree on everything. Actually, where one says the mind works like this, another one says the mind works like this, and they have these really big intellectual arguments about who's right and who's wrong with all these peer-reviewed papers. But the biggest thing that they do agree on is that the formative parts of our lives are the most important. The formative parts of our lives are the most important, and starting to set the path is what we determine is going to be normal for us as adults. That doesn't mean the only things in that unconscious mind are between 0 and 7, because we can drop a lot of stuff into that bowl, and I'll talk about bowl very shortly, but we can drop a lot of stuff into that bowl that sticks. Things like trauma stick really, really well in the unconscious mind. Super, super well. PTSD, our soldiers coming back from overseas, a lot of the friends that I joined the military with suffer from PTSD, and that stuff drops straight into the subconscious. Right, so 0 to 7 is hugely important. We're in what we call the theta state, and kids that have grown up through that, if you want to as a parent, you can teach a kid how to speak 3 or 4 different languages before the age of 6. That's how impacted you are on children or the environment that you bring them up in. And so for a lot of these kids that didn't have a great start, especially if you look at the ones that are in our prisons, you know, we've got a small percentage of prisoners that should never, ever be released. But if you forensically track them back, you can see that between 0 and 7, they had a horrendous start to life. Okay, so important to know for us, even with mindset, when we're dealing with mindset, it's largely created around our unconscious mind. Yeah, we can have a conscious mindset. I can teach you today that this is what you should do under stress, that this is what you should do under stress. And consciously, you can go into a job and say, yeah, I remember Fongy telling me that. But the moment the stress comes on, boom, it's going to disappear pretty quickly unless we practice it all the time. Now, that's great if you want to just go into confrontation every single day so you learn this stuff, but oftentimes we don't. Okay, so I want to talk to you about a bowl theory, and this is the one that I used and I use with the young people because I think it's really simple. There was a group of young adults, or actually teenage boys, that were kicked out of the school system, and they were doing an alternative education program in Dandenong, And they asked me to come in and said, hey, Fongy, can you come and have a chat with these kids about having a positive mindset? And I said, how long have I got? And they said, oh, you've got an hour. I said, so they have 18, 19 years of really bad stuff, and you want me to come in for an hour and change their lives by talking to them about staying positive? How well do you think that's going to work? And they sort of agreed and sort of said, well, what do you suggest? And I said, well, why not tell them why they are like they are? What makes them them? And then at least then they can understand, okay, that's why I do what I do. And if they want to change it, then I can tell them how. But let's not go in then and expect that 1 hour of positive stuff's going to change their lives. Let's just tell them why they are like they are. And so I went into the classroom and I drew this bowl on the board. And listen, this refers not just to being under stress. This is about everything in life. If you've got patterns going on, largely it's because of the bowl. Stuff that's going on there. If you're one of those officers like I used to deal with in the New Zealand police who always get in trouble, they're always talking to members of the public in the wrong way, and the moment they're yelled at, they yell back. That's the bowl. That's stuff that's happening that's embedded in there that they can't control unless they identify it. Anyway, I drew this bowl on the board and I said, hey fellas, who makes the best scrambled eggs? And they said, after a bit of confusion, yeah, and then hands start to go up. And I said, okay, well, give me some of those ingredients. And then we started getting ingredients like, some eggs, some bacon, cheese, butter, tomatoes. And then one of the boys said onions. To which another young fella from another gang stands up and goes, oh, why would you put effing onions in your eggs, mate? Onions are gross. He says, well, it's not your effing egg, is it? You beep, beep, beep. Oh, yeah, and what? Next thing they're having this huge argument in the classroom. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell? We're here to talk about, who they are, and suddenly this big gang thing starts to erupt. Now, we've got 3 different gangs in the room. We've got the Apex gang, we've got kids from the Bloods, and we've got kids from the Crips. And so already there's a bit of tension in the room. And so when they're starting to argue about onions, I know it's all on. And so I need to try and settle things down and get them to sit down. But anyway, after we did that, I said to them, so is everyone going to eat their eggs like that? I said, oh, no way I'm going to eat them like that. I've got to cook them. I said, oh, tell me about that. And so they went about telling me how they were going to do it. On a hot stove, pan, chuck some butter in, and then they'd obviously cook it. I then said to them, hey guys, listen, that bowl is representative of us on the day we're born. If we're lucky, we're born an empty bowl. And I say if we're lucky, because some of us are not. Some are born with negative ingredients in their bowl right from the word go. Fetal alcohol syndrome. Yeah. Addicted to drugs. So the moment they take a breath, we've got them on Narcan to try and get rid of that. But the hope is, I said to the boys, that every single one of you came into this world as an empty bowl. Then everyone else gets to throw all these ingredients into that bowl to make you who you are today. I said, so tell me, if you look back on your childhood, what are some of the things you wish weren't in that bowl? Because they affect them today. And we got all sorts. No parents. One boy in that classroom actually was taken off his mum on day 0. She didn't even get to hold him. Boom, gone. 6 different state homes over 7 years. Now, it's not great for a human being that wants to try and set foundations and find people that he can rely on. Very quickly, he gets a syndrome where he doesn't like to be or ever form relationships with people for long periods of time because he doesn't trust that people are going to stay around. Obviously, no love. Physical abuse was huge. Violence. Sexual abuse, even for boys. Homelessness. There was a couple of, there's one boy there that was sleeping under a bridge that came to the course as well. There were drugs, alcohol, and the normal things that we would expect from, their upbringing. But the other thing was that the environment where they would cook their eggs on the hot stove in a nice pan to make it their perfect scrambled egg was also perfect for their ingredients in their bowl. So where they were living in Dandenong, there was a lot of people that would support those red ingredients in the bowl. So everything worked out pretty well as far as they're concerned. But very quickly they learned, oh, geez, there's a lot of red stuff in my bowl. Actually, there was minimal green, but tons and tons of red. So I said to them, okay guys, here's the story. Tomorrow, you're going to have a child yourself. Tell me what you would change in that bowl if you were to if you wanted to change your child, because obviously you want to learn about how to change. So let's talk about that. Well, what would you have that's different in that bowl for your child tomorrow when she's born? And obviously it was the opposite of everything that they did have. They wanted to love, family, school, money, a house, food, and they also knew that in order for them to succeed anywhere, they'd need to move away. That actually the environment that they're in wasn't very supportive of a green bowl. In the same way, when we're dealing with people like drug addicts that end up getting sent to rehab, I don't know if you've ever met someone like that, but when they're forced to go to rehab, they're taken away from the most biggest part of that addiction, that environment, because that's where the drugs come from. They're pulled away from that environment, they're put into a rehab, and they're forced to stay there because they're sentenced there, and they learn how to manage money. They learn the education around why drugs are bad for them and what it does to the brain, all those sorts of things. They learn that there are support systems. They learn all these fantastic things in a really good green environment. So why do they fail when they leave? 99% of them, when they come out of rehab, end up reoffending or go back onto drugs. Why?
That surrounding environment.
We end up letting them go straight home to where they just came from. And even though they would think in their own minds that, you know what, I'm going to go back and I'm going to change all my friends, I'm going to change all of the stuff that's going on, they can't. Their environment is super, super important for making those big changes. In the same way for me, growing up and getting in trouble, and then a judge making a decision to throw me into the military with my mum's permission, they took a bowl of red stuff and threw it into a green environment. And they say that things get dropped into our subconscious mind through repetition of new behaviors. You want to learn something? Do it repetitively. Same like earning your license. Yeah, you've got graduated levels to your license. And the government knows that between your learners and your first P license, that you're going to need a lot of hours of practice because everything is so mechanical. And then you go to your red Ps, and then you go to your green Ps, and in the hope that once you become a fully licensed driver, you've had enough repetition there for that skill to become largely unconscious. We can do it without even thinking about it. I can drive down the road, and I'm sure every single one of us on here can as well. We can drive down the road and think about what's on for dinner. So a lot of the patterns and the things that we think about and the things that keep coming around, cyclic things, are from the bowl. They're things that keep happening. And when you hear from people's mouths, oh, why do I always end up like this? Or the boys, why do I keep getting myself in trouble even if I try to change? Well, largely because you've got a bowl full of red stuff that you haven't actually identified, and you need to change some stuff. Why am I scared to confront people? We have a lot of authorised officers that will not confront people, even though they know that the person potentially is committing some type of offence. Yet, everything they wanted for the perfect human being was the opposite to what they currently had. The reason why they don't change is because largely they're still in the same environment. And secondly, because they don't know how to change those red ingredients to green ones. Simply, if I've got something red in there, I've just got to replace it with green. And I've got to do it so often that it takes away the red stuff and becomes green. Even my thoughts around certain things like love. Some people go from relationship to relationship and relationship to relationship, largely because of their thoughts around relationships. Or their thoughts around money and not having it. So our mindsets are representative of the bowl. They represent our values, green or red, good or bad. Our belief systems, good or bad. Our biases, our reactions to different things. Where one person reacts in a certain way, another person reacts in a not so good way. those start to become representative of our bowl. It's interesting, the other day I was talking to a group that we were training, and I said, what do you like under conflict? And then one says, well, I'm Italian. We love conflict. I said, well, there you go, straight away. She goes, I actually have to force myself to not get involved in conflict and pull myself back because I know that I represent government. But everything inside of me wants to go scream at that person and scream back. Interesting. Values, beliefs, reactions. My experiences growing up. What have I experienced going into this job? All right. It's interesting because even in the police, we would expect that our officers would react a certain way under huge stress. But experience is huge, and if they haven't had a lot of life experience, then that can impact them being able to do their job professionally. So, for example, we had in the mid-2000s a group of young cadets which they were trying to trial and do a pilot program and to see how it would work if we brought 16 to 18-year-olds into the police. Right? I was one of the instructors at the academy at the time, and I'm thinking, this doesn't look very good. It might have been great back in the 60s because kids are a bit different when they're teenage years. They're a lot more resilient, they're harder, a lot of them grew up on farms and they worked all the time. But we're dealing with kids now that have grown up in an era where they're on the joystick and sitting in front of TV. So how is this going to pan out? And so these kids arrive at the police academy and they look like kids. They've got the acne and the braces, and they just look like little kids. And we're putting them into a police uniform in the hope that, you know what, they're going to go out onto the street in 3 months and they're going to be the best cops ever. Interesting. And so one of the cops, one of these young kids, ends up going out onto the street and he ends up attending his first warrant. And it was a warrant on a gang pad or dress. Soon as he walked in with the rest of the police, once we cleared the rooms and stuff, the gang members saw him. Now these are old gang members that know the system inside out. And the moment they locked eyes on this young kid, they were into him. So much so, his life experience as far as dealing with that was zero. He ended up in a position where he just froze. He started shaking. And then he wet himself on the floor of a gang pad. Not exactly the image we want to portray with policing, but it wasn't that young fella's fault. If anything, it was our fault for pushing them into those types of experiences when they weren't ready. Okay, and those are decisions obviously made well above my pay scale. But you know what? They trialed it, they did it once, and then that was it. And so we learned the lesson very quickly. So why is it important to know why we are like we are? Well, firstly, we can identify things that probably don't serve us well. I don't care whether you're an authorised officer, whether you're an extension staff, or whether you're just a dad at home. There are some ingredients in that bowl that do affect the way that we behave under certain stresses. If you own a business, the same thing. What things don't serve you well? Leadership, if you're a manager, what do people think of you as a manager? That's important to know as well, because if they don't like something, potentially there's something that you need to look at and go, you know what? I get that, and how do I change it? And especially for us representing government, it does affect our ability to represent those organisations professionally. When we have a red ingredient in that bowl that comes out every time we're talking to members of the public, you can guarantee it's going to impact our ability to represent our organisation. And oftentimes that's in the form of some type of complaint. But the great thing is, when we do identify things that are red inside of that bowl, we can train them out. We can get rid of them pretty simply by replacing old behaviours with new ones. So simple. But you've got to do that repetitively every single time. You can't push yourself back into the old me. Like our Italian lady said the other day, she goes, I force myself every time I'm in conflict to pull myself back and stay in the green. Because I know what it might do for my job. So there's a reason why she does that. And once we recognize those triggers, then we can learn to react accordingly. Listen, I'm not the perfect person. The reason I ended up in the military was because I wasn't. And one of the things I did grow up with that happened a lot was a lot of family violence. And so even as a little kid growing up, watching my mum get hit, I would run in and I would stop that happening and I'd get whacked. You know, right from the age of around 6, 7, 8. And I had 2 sisters with me at the time, and I'd run in, try and stop what was happening to mum, get a whack, then I'd run, grab the 2 girls and I'd put them in the wardrobe and close the door. But I would always try and stop it happening. And then I didn't think that affected me one bit at all until I was in the police and I walked through the door and this domestic violence incident was happening right in front of me that we got called to. And believe it or not, my mind just went straight back to when I was 6, 7, 8 years of age. And all the chemicals dropped back and all the memories dropped back. And so I went to do exactly what I did when I was a kid, except I'm a bit bigger now. Yep. I'm a bit bigger and I've got handcuff, baton, OC spray, all the works. And so I went and stopped him doing what he was doing. And then I kept going. And then I kept going. And then I kept going. And subconsciously, without even thinking about it, I was doing stuff to him that I should have stopped about a minute ago, until my colleague dragged me off and said, mate, you got to stop. He's done. So I was justified to a point to stop him doing what he was doing. But without even realizing it, I'd switch back to the bowl under that stress. And I was playing out that kid that I was at the age of 6, 7, 8. And so I ended up having to get help for that, recognize it, change things. So when you're under that type of stress, okay, and it doesn't actually even have to be huge stress, how do we react? If I'm at home with my kids and they're doing A, B, C, and D, how do we react? Oh, there's stuff that I've still got to do differently all the time. So under the stress of this person sitting at the table, then standing up and grabbing something off the kitchen bench and blocking your exit on the farm property, what types of things can we expect physiologically to happen to my body under that type of stress? What do you think? What things can I expect?
For me, having a bit of understanding of how I'd cope with that sort of stress, probably could understand better. Doing this exercise sounds good, but I'd probably freeze. I'd just freeze. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Not good with confrontation.
You know what? I don't think we're all born natural with confrontation unless we're brought up in it, and it happens all the time. So, yeah, thanks, Kit. So what sort of things can I expect to happen inside of my body under stress?
Heart rate goes up.
Yeah. First thing that happens is my heart rate starts to increase. What else is going to happen? I'm sure we've all been under some type of
breathe heavily.
Yeah, well, our breathing's got to coincide
Hold
with
your
the heart
breath,
rate.
go tense. Yep.
Yeah, so my heart rate goes up, so too must my breathing. I can't have a real fast heart rate without the breathing starting to synchronize itself with that. So yes, absolutely. I start to breathe shallow, rapid.
It's everything that kicks.
Say again,
kicks in
Louisa?
with the, I was just going to say everything that kicks in with your fight and flight, so your brain focuses and sort of narrows down on a couple of things, even though it feels like it's running at 1,000,000 miles a minute. Your muscles tense up so that you can run away. Heart rate goes up. Your breathing changes so that you can run.
Good.
So it's all those things that give you the ability to escape from that situation, and
Yes.
it stops you thinking broadly and calmly.
Good. So automatically, once we start to hyperventilate, obviously there's less oxygen to the brain, therefore our brain becomes fogged. But it is concentrating on keeping us alive. What's in front of me that's going to hurt me? Well, there's the threat. I can see the threat, so it narrows in on that threat. The only issue being that when we're human beings and we're locked in on one threat, oftentimes that threat has friend threats. and we wouldn't even see them because we're locked on one threat. And so, yes, our bodies are trained that way. Well, it's not trained that way, they're made that way, but we have to train them to do something different. We've got to train our minds to go, you know what, there may be others out there or with that threat that I need to be aware of. And so even the art of moving your eyes off a threat to make sure these other ones are not coming in is huge under stress, because our body's shutting all of that stuff down that should be normal. And we talk about the blood. We start to shake a lot. Blood's flooding into the vital organs and into the big muscles, tensioning up, as Louisa said, largely in the hope that if something happens, I can make a decision to fight, flight, or freeze. Your bodies are amazing. And the reason why that blood's disappearing from your extremities is because it's not needed there. I don't need those little fingers to help me run away, so let's drain all the blood from those and get that blood into the center. The extremities of my skin start to flood, all the blood starts to flood back into the center. I want those big muscles ready to go. I want my vital organs flooded with blood, ready to keep me alive. The other thing that happens is our digestive system shuts down. People start to feel real sick in the stomach under conflict. They don't want to do conflict. And so automatically the gut starts to churn. It's shutting down. There's no need for me to have a big feed when someone's trying to kill me. Bottom line.
Last supper.
We don't need to eat. And so the body does all the stuff without us even thinking about it. Important to know. Important to know. So it's going to impact the way you process information. I know that if you've been under high stress, my ability to get a statement from you that's super accurate is minimal. And that's okay. In the police, we know that if we've got 100 witnesses, we're going to get 100 different statements out of them, interview statements. That's okay. Somewhere in the middle lies the truth. And unless they've actually got body cameras on, most of what they recollect is going to be false anyway. And the other thing is, if we've got groups of people that have been talking to one another, we know if they've been collaborating because their stories are all the same. So if we get to a scene first and all these people are in a big circle having a big chat, that when we pull them apart and they start telling their stories, everything's going to sound the same. It's not right. Because in big groups of people, once they start talking, if someone's more vocal or one person's more vocal than the other, and he says, no, that guy was wearing a green jacket, then we can edit movies pretty quickly in that sort of stress. The movie that we were playing, I thought it was a red jacket. Oh, well, it must be green. So I just changed the color of that very quickly. So expect brain fog. Expect that it's going to trigger that fight, flight, or freeze response. Expect that it's going to stuff your short-term memory up, and even your ability to try and communicate through those types of interactions calmly. As much as we would like to think so, the moment Mr. Man grabs a weapon from the bench and stands in front of my exit, I can guarantee you, if the heart rate's up, your ability to speak calmly and de-escalate starts to diminish as well, until you've had a bit of experience, etc., etc., etc. So what part of the brain then is responsible for that fight, flight, or freeze response, that feeling we get when we're about to go into confrontation? As you start to hyperventilate and your heart rate goes up, what part of the brain orders that?
Can't pronounce it. Is it the hippo one?
The hippocampus is where our memories are stored. Yeah, it's a super important part.
I cannot remember the name of it, but I've heard it referred to as the reptilian part of the brain.
Okay, yep, it's certainly one of the oldest parts of the brain. It's responsible for that response. It's called the amygdala, which also forms part of the cerebellum. Here's what's happening. In the heat of that stress, seeing the man standing there at my exit, screaming at me, he's got a weapon in his hand, all of that information floods through my eyes, through all of my senses, into my brain. Holy crap. Information comes through my prefrontal cortex, all the way down through my hypothalamus, and comes down and ends up at my amygdala, which is Greek for almond, by the way. A tiny little almond-shaped part of your brain that's responsible for the emotional response to that stress. So it controls the whole body. If you've ever heard of little man syndrome, where someone little always gets in there and starts trouble, he's your man. Because he controls the big body, and he's the one yelling out to it or what it should do. But in order for that amygdala to make a decision on whether you have a fight, run, or freeze, is largely going to depend on what's in your bowl, what's in my memories, what's in my upbringing, what's in the bowl. So he jumps next door and goes, okay, man standing there with knife, looking through all the files to try and find a relevant file that I can pull on under that stress to go, yes, I've got a reference there. Now, that'd be great if I grew up in a family where we all had knife fights with each other and we stabbed each other all the way growing up. But now I've got a man standing there at the door, and if I haven't got a reference to it, that amygdala's got to make a decision based on that. That doesn't mean it has to be a knife fight or someone with a knife for me to pull on that experience. It could be me being under other stresses, having a fight with someone, a hands-on fight, or potentially talking someone down even. If I've got reference to those, I can start pulling on those to help me make a decision on what I might do right there and then. I can also use negative ones to help me as well. So if in a past situation, I got myself involved and I ended up getting hurt, then I can pull on that memory and go, geez, I don't think I'll get involved with it this time. I'll remember what happened last time. This time I'm going to run. I'll try something different. So your amygdala can use either or. Good memories, training memories, experiences growing up. It can also use the negative ones as well. And say, okay, I learned from that. I will not do that again.
So out of interest, how much would something, so Graham's clearly done a lot of public speaking, so learning how to overcome and deal with that stress, how much can you draw on something like that, or say horse riding, where you have to stay calm under every circumstance, otherwise you're going to fall off?
Yeah, good question.
So how much can you draw on that?
You can draw on that a lot. In the fact that he gets up there and stands in front of people and is able to communicate with people, oftentimes it'll start to come out without him even thinking about it. Doesn't mean that when we get up in front of people, we don't feel any nerves whatsoever. Even the best public speakers in the world, when they go on stage, they're feeling that adrenaline dump. But they've learned to control it because of that experience and being in there. In the same way, if Graham's used to getting up there and being confident in the way he introduces himself and gets into his talk for the day, then the chances are under a bit of stress because the adrenaline's up already. I've got some type of reference there. Remember, the best memories that the amygdala pulls on are the ones that are attached to some type of emotion. Yeah, it's the emotions that recall that memory back to us. I switch the radio on and this song comes on, and maybe it's one that I broke up with my girlfriend to, and then suddenly all these chemicals and stuff come flooding back in and gives me a bit of deja vu, like, holy crap, I remember this. It's almost like I'm back there on the day. Our brains are amazing and they're made to do that. Pull on those old memories. So yes, absolutely. With the horse riding thing, I'm not even sure. I've never ever delved into that. That would be interesting. Because you have to stay calm on a horse. I used to own a horse. And they certainly know when you're upset or when there's any doubt in your mind.
Well, there's also that split second where you know that if you don't do something at that exactly then, you will fall off.
Timing.
And
yeah.
It's staying completely calm and going, so how do I fix this? And the first few times you stress out, you fall off, you end up with bruises. But then the more you do it, the calmer you become and you go, okay, we can do this. And you
exactly
control
what you
you're
talked
doing.
about, I think, Louisa, sirenitis. Yeah, the first time you hear the sirens and click everything on, everything just goes through the roof. Now we're saying, okay, I get it, my timing was out. This time I need to do it a different way. Same with these stunt riders and guys on motorbikes that do all these flips, triple flips in the air and stuff like that. I think, man, you know how many times they've got it wrong before they've got it right? It's huge. But that's an adrenaline dump that they learn to control, so that each step of the way they're going through, they learn to overcome it. Fantastic. All right, so how can we biohack the system so that when we are starting to shut down and potentially freeze, how can we make sure that we can start to turn the body clock around and go, you know what, there's no need to have a meltdown body. We can biohack the system. When it comes to overriding stress responses, you cannot beat experience. If you've done something a million times before, you do it one more time, you're going to be able to cope a lot better than someone that's never had it. Bottom line. Okay. Tactical breathing, what we call in the police tactical breathing. It means that you start to force oxygen back into your body. When it's trying to hyperventilate, hell no, you're not going to hyperventilate. And you can do this at any point. The idea though really for us is to go, you know what, if I'm shutting down and I can feel myself starting to lose control, that's when I need to take the breath. It's too late when we're full on into that full adrenaline dump. The moment I feel my heart rate going up, I'm straight into that breathing technique. And it's something we use in the police all the time. Whether we're knocking on a door to tell someone that their loved one's passed away, or whether we're about to blow a door in and enter the building and clear it. We must take a breath. What do? 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds release. Right. Any confrontation, if you're a businessman about to have confrontation with staff, or if you're in a capacity where you guys are managers and you're talking to staff, or whether you're in a packed gallery full of people that don't like you very much and you're trying to deliver on behalf of government, take a breath. All that does is forces oxygen up to the brain and holds it for 4 seconds, and it's enough for your amygdala to go, hang on. I didn't order this. I did not order this. Where's all this oxygen coming from? And if that's enough for it to go, okay, if I've got that much oxygen, things must be okay. And so then it delivers less adrenaline into the system. Because remember, that little almond thing has to ring downstairs and deliver some type of response to what it's just seen. And so he jumps on the phone and he goes, rings downstairs to the adrenal gland, says, "G'day, Mr. Adrenal Gland. Listen, it's Dr. Amygdala here. Mate, we've got a guy standing in front of us with this freaking big knife and he's blocking my exit. Yeah, can you deliver 100 milligrams of adrenaline into the system?" Yes, Dr. Amygdala, no problems. Bang. Within a microsecond, we get this huge dump of adrenaline. Or 100 milligrams of it anyway. Cortisol levels go up, heart rate goes up, blood disappears, all those things that we talked about. All ordered by that little almond-shaped thing. And so if you can control them, the best way to do that is through breathing. Get some oxygen to the brain. When we're talking about fight, flight, or freeze, the only time you would stay in fight is if you were one of those people that grew up in an environment and your bowl was full of fighting. Like our Italian lady. Right. I would suggest that the biggest thing for us, especially in the job that we do, is that we remove ourselves. But the last thing we need to do is freeze. Especially when we've got an exit blocked and someone really angry with us that's now potentially got some type of weapon. I want to make sure that my amygdala starts to de-escalate immediately, otherwise I'm going to freeze. And freezing could mean the difference between you going home and not going home. Or going home hurt. And what we do know is that when people are super angry with you, it's the same as you having that meltdown because they're angry with you. Your amygdala is going nuts trying to keep you alive. Their amygdala is going nuts because it's angry at you being there. And so if you can understand that when you're dealing with human behavior, you're not looking at the arms and the finger going in the air and them swearing and cursing and all that sort of stuff. Those are just symptomatic of a piece of grey matter between two ears that's stressed out. And if you can talk to that piece of grey matter and use certain words like empathy, then you de-escalate the amygdala pretty quickly. Research tells us when you use empathy, it starts to de-escalate the amygdala very, very quickly. What does empathy mean in this case? Well, it means understanding their point of view. Doesn't mean we agree with it. It means calling out the behavior, saying, I get it, mate, listen, I can see you're upset. I can see you're frustrated. I can see you're pissed off. I can see you're angry. whatever you're seeing, you call it out, because then the amygdala goes, holy shit, he knows I'm angry. So I've got to just try and change a little bit. And actually, if you call it out straight away, you tend to hear some type of rebuttal. Something like, hey mate, listen, I can see you're getting really angry with me. You go, no, I'm not angry with you. I'm just angry with the whole process. I'm angry with government. Government's doing this to me. When you hear that, you know that you've targeted the amygdala, because now it's trying to make up another excuse for why it's angry. So suddenly it's not angry with you, it's actually angry at our department. Great, I've already started that first step to de-escalation. So empathy works super well on de-escalating the amygdala. Calling out what you're feeling, calling out what you're hearing, what you're seeing. And obviously training's super important as well. And that is the hope of us being able to create or simulate potential scenarios that you could walk into. Now, obviously we're not face to face, so this is going to be one of those things that are hard for us to do. But if we were face to face, we would run through some of those simulations and scenarios that have happened in the last couple of years. That way everyone gets to run through them and know they have happened in Victoria, and that we can potentially end up in those type of situations, but at least now our amygdala can jump next door to our memory bank and go, yeah, I remember that. This is what I need to do. We can also biohack the system by chewing. If you've ever been to America before, you'll see a lot of cops, they either chew gum or they chew tobacco. And the reason they do that is because it stimulates saliva, which keeps our digestive system running. So where our digestive system should be shutting down under stress, the amygdala is going, why are you eating? Someone wants to hurt us, mate. What are you eating for? Oh, it must be okay. And so it delivers less adrenaline into the system. But obviously I haven't got it up there because I don't advocate us turning up onto people's farms, having a good old chew in front of them, or grabbing a burger when they're yelling at you and having a good old feed. But it is a way to biohack the brain. And last but not least is professionalism. If we're professional, that should help us to de-escalate pretty well, right? Why would working for a professional organization, employed by a professional organization, being a manager in a professional organization, why should that help us to manage our stresses instead of being with some sort of rogue organization that does anything and everything any way it wants to?
Well, there's discipline that comes with, the roles, but there's also heaps of training like what we've got today that comes with the role that, people are relying on, that they know their stuff and are equipped to be able to deal. Yeah,
good. So the organisation, to help us remain professional, make sure that we're well trained and make sure that we've got access to different things. What else does it do to do that? Kit, what do you think? What sort of things does the organisation have in place to help keep us safe as professionals?
I guess there's like the job field safety plan.
Okay.
Follow some of those things. But I guess I was thinking about how you asked that question, and I was more thinking maybe there's your work self and then there's your individual self. And I guess when you beg a bit more of your work self, you sort of, I don't know how to describe it. Maybe you are just going to act a bit more professional in that situation. Potentially, if it's just you outside of work in that individual, you might actually, I guess the chances are you might actually react more poorly. You might take it a bit more personally.
Beautiful. So you're talking about professional versus personal, absolutely. So sometimes even working for a professional organisation means that I'm not in there representing myself. I've got to put on my professional hat every time I go to work. And I've got to leave my personal self at home. That doesn't mean I can't bring attributes like humour and good communication, which is part of who I am, but it means I've got to leave some of that personal red stuff that's in the bowl at home. Yeah, I like that. Louisa, what do you reckon? What's the organisation got in place?
I thought exactly the same as
Yeah.
Kit.
Yeah, good. So what we do know is that we operate under certain standards. We've got code of ethics. We've got standard operating procedures that govern our movements day to day within professional organisations like government. And so important to know because that keeps me safe. And therefore it should mean that I know how far I can go when I'm dealing with people. I know that if I jump too far, that I could end up in a position where I then bring disrepute to the organisation. So as long as I stay within the parameters I know are there, I'm fine. I jump outside of them, that's all me. So that should help keep me safe. So if you think about it, again, whether you're in business or whether you're in management or whether you're in government, what are the attributes of a fantastic professional? If I was to ring one of the clients or people you deal with, what would they tell me about you as a professional? If I was to ring your staff members, if you're a manager, and said, oh, tell me a bit about Graham, or tell me a bit about Louisa, or tell me a bit about Kit, what would they say are professional attributes of you?
Hard to talk about yourself, isn't it?
That's a tough...
We can make something up there.
Yeah.
I think calm, that's probably something people are after, that they're not going to get someone that's yelling and, you know, super responsive in an negative way. So calmness, someone who's listening, understanding from a staff point of view.
Okay, let's just hold there for a sec. Can you write these down? Because I think they're important. Yeah, he said calm. Super important as a professional to remain calm. Now, I would expect that if my staff members were new to this job, that there's going to be a period of time where they don't even know what calm is. They're going to be nervous. They're going to have that sirenitis. I love that word, by the way. They're going to have that sirenitis for a wee while until such time as they're able to cope with those stresses. Yeah. What was the other one you just said, Graham?
They're listening, actively listening.
Good. So
Attention.
listening forms part of communication. So if you write down good communicator as an attribute, as a leader, as a representative of government, as a manager, you need to have good communication. So write that down. Good communication, which means we're listening. Active listening is the most important part of communication. And also we are able to communicate to people at all levels. Not just at the learned level, but also down at their bottom level where people may not get what we're trying to say. So we start to lose the jargon that comes with government organisations, and if we have to, we break it down into layman's terms. Absolutely, we've got to be good communicators. What's another attribute, Kit?
Yeah, I certainly thought active listening was a good one. Calm, another attribute.
Louisa?
Responsiveness and following through on what you agree to do.
Okay, so let's write down integrity. Integrity tells us we are what we say we are, and we do what we say we're going to do. So integrity is huge as a professional.
Honesty.
Honesty goes alongside of integrity as well. Is it okay to tell half lies? Well, no, because if they come back and bite you, they're going to bite you hard. But not only that, they will also bite the rest of our organisation. So if someone thinks they can only half trust Graham, they now only half trust Agricultural Victoria. So yeah, honesty is huge. Give me some more attributes.
Respect.
Respect. Respectful. Write down respectful. Again, we need to ensure that we are respectful towards people. Whether they respect us back really is irrelevant. We're the ones that are in positions of authority. We're the ones that are there to do the job we're doing. And so therefore we can just communicate that to people. If they don't respect us, that's fine. In some way or one way or another, it's going to end up escalating. Like Louisa said, it just gets handballed over and someone's going to follow it up. So they can't expect that just because they disrespect us and we can't get our job done, that's it. There are always consequences down the road, and we're going to win that fight. We just don't need to win it now, but we treat people respectfully. And the only time we disrespect them is when we've got stuff going on in the bowl. Pretty simple. Another one, that was a good one, by the way. I like respect. Write down empathic. Right, empathy is going to work well in helping us be a professional. We can use empathy all the time. Listen, I get it. I know that COVID's been hard, and I can use that to help me not only de-escalate, but show that I'm the professional that I am. I understand where they're coming from. I may not agree with them, but I'm going to keep this conversation going. Presentation. How important is presentation? Graham, you stand up in front of people in large groups.
Presentation, how you hold yourself, and I think the respect thing, respect and empathy, and how people watch how you respond to others as well. So,
yes,
you have lots of people with different range of respect, but you've got to take the high road. Always take the high road. And it was a good point Kit made before. Like sometimes what you might do on a weekend, if it was your mates, and how you might respond versus when you're there as a representative, and just try to be calm, take the high road. And a lot of people, you earn respect by how you respond.
Yes.
People who don't know you, and then people who've known you longer, they go, they've got more to base it on. But
yes,
so you don't want to go how you respond to someone who offers a negative view. The rest of the room will be making judgments based on how they see you respond.
Yeah, cool. I like that. So what about the way you dress, the way you present yourself? How important is that when you're in those big times when you're delivering speeches and stuff? Why can't you turn up looking like a hobo and someone that's just been homeless for 50 years?
Yeah, no, that's right. I think that's the challenge sometimes, just trying to work out what's the right thing to wear. Like when you might have a jacket on and being that versus when you might be in just more casual uniform, just neat, what have you. Like there's interesting situations where what you're wearing, you're trying to make sure you're looking professional and neat, but it's just about, is it neat, casual, or is it in uniform, or
Yes.
are you wearing the bag of fruit?
Yes. Yep, absolutely. So even presentation is super important. Presentation that targets the audience we're dealing with. If we're likely to get into a lot of trouble, if we're a lot more confrontation if we turn up in uniform, then maybe that's a time to just, like you say, just dress neat and smart.
Mm.
But the way we hold ourselves as part of that presentation is super important as well. Fantastic. So we're going to just rock into a couple of videos, and I want you to watch the videos. I want you to, number one, just take note of the following. What's the incident that's happening? I want you to list the green things that the officer says or does, but I also want you to think about the red things that he's saying or doing as well. Okay, this is a little bit about professionalism now. I want you to pull apart a video. Obviously, in hindsight, we get to see these things, and I'm a huge advocate of police, don't get me wrong, but I want to make sure that we can use some of the learnings from these videos, even in the job that we do.